Cocoa chocolate. Like blue ice, it's chocolate. Chocolate. Wow. One more stick and I come alive. Midnight snack, rock a new delight. It hits just right every time.
So today we are going to do a chocolate simulation in Blender. I've seen a lot of chocolate simulations and usually they just make a liquid simulation and give it a chocolate color. But in this tutorial we are going to have a look at the viscosity setting in order to get it to look more like chocolate. Now one thing I have to mention is that in Blender liquid simulations are not the best that you can have. And this is also the case for chocolate simulations. Now just to show you what we'll be creating today, you've probably already seen it in the screen by now. But we've got this ice cream that we created in the previous tutorial. And now we're going to make a chocolate simulation. And it's pretty slow, by the way, so I cannot really play it in the viewport like this. I do have to warn you that for this specific simulation, I placed it on 256 for the bake. And I couldn't even finish the bake overnight. So I had it turned on for approximately 8 or 9 hours. And in that time, I didn't finish the bake. It came to frame 40 or something, and I just stopped it by then. So let's go over the settings real quickly. When you make a liquid simulation, the very first thing you'll do is you add a flow object, which is this sphere, and we go to the physics settings. You add a fluid by clicking right here and setting the type to flow, liquid, inflow. Sampling substeps to 3. And that's basically all you need to do for your flow object. Now all of this has to take place in a domain. So what you do is you add a cube, you bring it upwards, and you click on fluid type domain. You make this a domain where the fluid can be calculated. Now, the size of this box is the voxel size, which means this is the resolution of your liquid simulation. So if I increase this, you will see that the box gets smaller. Now it's calculating more in a smaller square. That's basically what's going on. So if you increase this to 128, for example, then it will be a really small square, but your calculations will be better. You set this to domain, you set this to liquid, and then let me move this over here. This is just for an example so that you know how to set up a liquid simulation. I kind of assume that you already do know how to make a normal liquid simulation. If not, I have a couple of videos on this channel where you can watch that, especially in the product animation masterclass where we have a liquid simulation on the cam. So check that out if you'd like. Either way, here are a couple of the settings. CFL number. This is going to increase the speed of your baking time because it is doing faster computation. By the way, if you hover over all of these, then you will get a tooltip which says maximal velocity per cell, greater CFL numbers will minimize the number of simulation steps and the computation time. So it is giving us instructions on what all of these things do and what we want to achieve. Now for this very specific simulation, what I did is I turned off the bottom so that all the chocolate would be able to fall through this bottom. This was due to some testing that I did, which you can see on the screen right now. And there are two things that we can do. I tried using the APIC because it is better for static meshes and more stable behavior. But in my case, it did give me some pretty weird looking results. So I stick to the flip fluid, even though it is supposed to give you more splashy behavior, as it says right there on the tooltip. I didn't find this problematic at all because I used the specific setting, namely this high viscosity solver. And if you click on this and turn it upwards, it will be very viscous. Now what does viscous mean? Now viscosity is basically the way a fluid resists flowing. So things with a very low viscosity are flowing a lot. So water is quite flowy, it can splash out of each other. But things like honey, for example, are more viscous, which means that it is not going to flow out as much. It's going to be more sticky, basically. So what's going on? Right here we have the high viscosity solver, and you basically have two options. You can either turn on the diffusion and use one of these models, play around with these settings, but I found that this took me too much time in order to get to a pretty decent looking result. You can also use one of the presets, such as honey, oil, or water, but in this case I really didn't want to use it. I just used the high viscosity solver, played around with the strength, and the strength I finally used is right here, is the 0.02. Now, if I have a look at this, I basically had all my settings on default except for 2. So we have the high viscosity solver, which I set to 0.020. I left all of this alone, all of this as well. It's all just default values, except for the field weights, which I unfolded, and I set the gravity to 2. Because using the viscosity solver, I find that it was too slow. Okay, so then I'll change the strength right here for the viscosity, but then I find it was too fast or still too slow. So I decided to speed it up by increasing the gravity for this scene. Now, basically what it came down to is I animated this ball to go from left to right and drop some chocolate on this ice cream. But you might be wondering, how can I drop it on the ice cream? Won't it fall through automatically? And yes, that is the case unless you select the ice cream, go to the Physics Properties tab, go to Fluid and set this as an effector. And an effector is basically a collision type object. So this means that the fluid can interact with the effector, which is the collision type object. I also set the sampling substeps to 3. So basically what happens then is you turn this render on. I don't find that this is absolutely perfect, by the way. I think there's a lot of problems with this. If you play this, you can see some of those waving motions going on, but I can deal with it right now because it's a very high resolution division. But if you have a lower resolution division, it will not look as good. So 128 was too low actually to have good quality. So 256 was the only one acceptable enough for me. So let's see, the final thing that I would like to show you is the way I changed this shader. So in the previous tutorial, we made this chocolate shader. It has some details in here. We have played around with the roughness, the colors, we added a coat. It's very simple. It's a very simple material, here it is. But I made some changes to this material for the chocolate. So if I click on the chocolate right here, you can see that I basically just played around with the roughness and the metallic slider. So I placed the metallic slider up a little bit. So here it was 0 and here the roughness looked different. But on this one, we simply made the roughness entirely black. I could have just done it like this. And the metallic up just a little bit to give it this shiny type of look. If you turn that off or turn it all the way on, I don't know, it's just going wrong a little bit. So somewhere over here I found to be the perfect value. And what I also did, because it turned out in the render that it gave some very weird highlight effects, is turn off the bump. So with the bump on, we were getting some type of weird noise looking patterns right there. And I didn't like it in the final render, especially when it moved. So I removed this from the texture. And that's actually the way to make a chocolate simulation. You set up a flow object, set it to inflow with a sampling substep of 3. You add a domain, and in the domain you will not change any settings except for the high viscosity solver, and maybe you want to increase the resolution division and the gravity. Finally, you just wait for one night to bake a couple of frames, and then you'll say, all right, this is good enough, and now I'll continue to the next shot. I hope you enjoyed this video. Click on subscribe, and in the next video we are going to be creating this shot. So click right here to watch it.
Cocoa chocolate, chocolate, like blue ice, it's chocolate. Choco, choco, chocolate.